Jarrett Cherry. Jarrett is the nephew of the NASA Apple Program Manager, Yvonne Massaquoi. Yvonne, if you could please stand up. Thank you so much for bringing Jarrett here with us. Zach Hovey is the grandson of Jack Hovey. Jack just celebrated his 63rd year at Ames Research Center. So Jack, thank you for bringing Zach here with us today. Jack Boyd, sorry. Owen O'Neill is the grandson of two grandfathers who have both been with NASA, and his grandfather, John O'Neill, is here with us. We heard from John yesterday. I think he's in the back. Thank you, John, for bringing Owen here with us. Shelby Holloway is the granddaughter of Tommy Holloway, who we've heard from today. So thank you, Tommy, for bringing Shelby here with us. And Nick Hernandez is the son of Johnny Hernandez, who has partnered with our director at previous Masters Forums. Thank you, Johnny, for having Nick here with us today. To give you a little bit of background on our panelists, I'll start with Owen. Owen is a 7th grade student at Friendswood Junior High in Texas. He's been inspired by his grandfather, who's been employed with NASA and is especially interested in human space exploration and the flight program. He's very active in his school, and he's currently a member of the National Honor Society. Owen plays football and basketball with his school. And in addition to sports, Owen enjoys reading, math, science, and is the youngest of 7 children. Zach is also a 7th grade student. However, on the other coast, Zach's coming with us from California. It's from St. Andrew's Episcopal School. He's the grandson of Jack, as we mentioned previously, and because of this, Zach has had many numerous experiences with NASA. He has seen the first Zeppelin to fly over Ames Research Center in the past 70 years. He sat on the engine of the Space Shuttle 747 airplane. He's had several visits to Ames, one of which included a live screening of the Mars 2000 rover launch. Zach is fascinated going to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, where he likes to watch the animal behavior, and he hopes to someday live in Hawaii, which he's had the opportunity to visit, and work as a marine biologist. Zach is the oldest of 3 children in his family. Jarrett is a 2nd grade student coming to us from Columbia, South Carolina. He's at a NASA Explorer School, Forest Lake Elementary. Last summer, Jarrett attended the Space Engineer Camp and is registered again for this summer, where he'll be going to Space and the Rocket Center. His favorite topics in school are math and science, and his hobbies include karate and playing the piano, and Jarrett has a recital coming up later this month. Nick is a 9th grade student at Eagle Ridge Junior High in Savage, Minnesota. He's looking forward to starting high school next year, and he's currently maintaining all A's, which is helping him for next year, where he'll be taking 2 math classes, honor science class, and AP social studies. Nick has many interests outside of school, including environmental conservation, bike riding, hobby grade remote control cars, his laptop, space industry, and he's recently become involved in theater, where he likes to work behind the scenes and help the show go. Nick has 2 older sisters. Shelby is in the last year of high school and is looking forward to next year, where she'll start at Texas A&M. She's ready to stay in Texas and work at Johnson Space Flight Center, where she'll be in the education office, hoping to help high school students become interested and inspired by the space exploration program. In her free time, Shelby enjoys her friends, family, going to church, and playing volleyball. Shelby has 1 sister. My name is Catherine Thomas. I work on the Apple Knowledge Sharing team. I'm a previous science teacher, so I'm thrilled to be working with all of you today. As you saw in my bio, I get my current fix of teaching by teaching yoga in my free time. and I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters. I'd like to encourage all of you to jot down some things that the students say today by turning your program booklet to page 20 and seeing the abstract for the session. You'll also get a few more details on the panelists that we have here. So far throughout this Masters Forum, we've heard from people who have led and are currently leading NASA. Now we're going to transition into hearing from the people who will be leading our nation in the few decades to come. So Zach, we'll start with you. Could you share with us what you think that NASA should do in the future?
I think that NASA should work on better propulsion so they could travel farther and faster using less fuel. And by that, they could, the astronauts could travel longer distances while still staying fit, because while in outer space, their bodies get deformed in a way. And also, they could travel farther distances. For example, like with the fuels now, the equivalent of getting to Mars now, they could get to like Pluto, which would be very helpful, and it would also take less time. And I think a good way to achieve that would be through what substances such as ion propulsion and particle compressor and particle accelerator engines, and yeah.
Thank you, Zach. And Jarrett, when we spoke, didn't you mention something about thinking NASA should go further in space?
Yes.
Would you like to share some more about that with us, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think NASA should go farther in space so they can discover new things.
What type of new things do you think might be out there?
More stars and planets.
More stars and planets?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And does anyone want to think about why what Zach thinks about further space exploration might be important?
It's important to try and push ourselves to go further, because just by pushing ourselves, we learn more about our solar system and what's really out there, and possibly discover some new resources or fuels.
Thanks, Nick. And if we don't push ourselves, we're going to stay where we always are, right?
Pretty much.
And Shelby, what about you? What do you think is important NASA should do in the future?
Well, I think NASA should continue human spaceflight, because humans have a different perspective on things, a hands-on type aspect that robots and other things, we would get information from those, but humans, it's a lot better perspective, and it's with better brain power. I mean, considering humans are right there, hands-on aspect. I also think that NASA should go in a step-by-step process to explore the vastness of space, with continuing in the International Space Station and then going to the moon and one day onto Mars. I think if NASA has a flexible deadline and a flexible schedule, things will get done better with goals that would be set for the future.
Thank you. Owen, do you relate to what Shelby has said?
Well, I think that NASA should just keep exploring space and see if there's any life on other planets, but also see if we can sustain our own life on those planets or on the moon, because one day we might not have Earth to stay on, so we might need somewhere else to live.
Is that something that you'd like to contribute to, Owen?
Yeah, I would like to contribute to that, because that seems like a great idea, to try and go and live somewhere else on a different planet, just completely different from Earth.
And have you daydreamed or imagined how we can make this possible?
Not really. Haven't really thought about how we make that possible.
How about any of you, Zach, Jarrett, Shelby, Nick, have any ideas how we can make this possible?
Yeah. That wasn't me.
Jarrett, you looked like you wanted to say something?
Since there's water on the moon, we could live on the moon because we could turn the water into oxygen.
Okay.
But we have to find the equipment.
So we need to create the technology for the equipment to turn.
Yes.
Okay. And Zach, what about you?
Well, I think that for different planets, I heard on TV that there are billions of planets in the universe, and approximately 1/8 or so are semi-inhabitable. Like they have the correct atmosphere for us, but the rest they're uncertain of. So if we could get that, then we could transport the rest of the resources. But again, with my point, you'd need better propulsion so you could get there faster. Like if you were bringing cows or chickens or stuff like that, then it would be quicker so they wouldn't run out of food before you get there. And yeah.
And Nick, I think that what Jarrett and Zach are saying about how we need to go deeper in space and we need to get there faster, I think what you told me about what NASA needs to do in the future, your views might help make this possible, right? Can you explain what you think NASA needs to do?
Well, I believe NASA needs to regain the glory from the Apollo days, but the only reason that the glory was lost was because we won the space race. The Russians gave up, and there were no competitors. And when it's a one-man race, it's a very boring race. And there's no real pressure to do, to push yourselves to try and beat yourself because you're the only one out there. You're the only one making the advancements. You're the only one who can do it.
I have a comment, I guess, on what he said in a different aspect, because space exploration is in an international arena at this point. With the International Space Station, we've been working together with other countries to continue human spaceflight and space research. I think to regain the spirit of exploration, at least for America, we need to let the people know what contributions NASA has made to society, because previously last year I was part of the Texas High School Aerospace Scholar Program, and we had to do different assignments, and one of the assignments we had to do was on the spin-offs that NASA has created, and I was like, that's pretty cool, because I had never heard of half of those things that NASA had come up with. And I think if our society was able to realize that NASA has contributed all of those things to society, they would be more apt to support the space program along with other science and technological research. So I think if we can get it out into the American society about what NASA has contributed and what they appreciate from NASA, that it would be better to support, that they would be more willing to support NASA. And also, I think it's important because people love exploration. And back in history, Columbus, he came to America to explore. Lewis and Clark explored the Louisiana Purchase, and people love exploring space. There's a lot of space to explore. It's vast. And I think people like to explore, so we should just go and continue with that.
Well, I believe that international cooperation is important, but privatization of the space industry could help rejuvenate some of the space race feeling.
I agree with Nick because almost everything the world has done has been in a race. Like ancient Rome, they conquered almost all of Europe in a race for power against the Huns and other tribes. And once again, we have been in a race with Russia, and we've gotten to the moon before them, and we've lost a few things, like the first man in space. That was, yeah. But again, it does help to have a race, because that's how we push ourselves, and that's how we have a greater goal that we all want to reach.
And so, Owen, would you like to talk about how you would like to contribute to your ideas of what NASA should do in the future?
Well, I would just continue taking science and math and mathematics, and if I enjoy NASA, I would try to get a job in it. But if it doesn't really suit me, I would try to persuade others to go and join NASA. But also invite my Senate and the congressmen to try to keep NASA alive, keep sending missions up into space.
Shelby, you and Nick are nodding your heads. You both agree.
Absolutely.
Can't do
Okay.
anything without money.
Can't do anything without money. Smart group up here. Jarrett, would you tell us a little bit about how you might like to contribute to NASA someday?
I would continue to love math and science and be an astronaut and engineer and make faster rockets so we could get to space faster.
Thank you. And Zach, I think it would be really interesting if you could share with us your thoughts about how space and water are similar.
Well, there are simple answers and complicated answers, but some of them are, well, you can, at a time, you can float in both of them completely. Like, you won't go up or down, you're in perfect balance. You can't breathe in either one by yourself. And in my opinion, they're both teeming with life. We just haven't found it in space yet.
Thank you. And Shelby, Nick, Owen, Zach, Jarrett, I'd like to open it up to all of you to talk about the views that you have of what NASA should do, why you think they're important, and how you'd like to contribute. Any additional thoughts that you haven't mentioned thus far?
I think for traveling into space from land here, I was just thinking, like, if you go straight up, that would consume a lot of fuel because you're just completely forcing gravity, like head on head. My opinion is that if you went at maybe like a 40-degree angle, that it might take a little longer to get up, but you wouldn't have to use as much fuel, and it wouldn't be as straining on the astronauts themselves.
Another easy way to get into space is to carry the space vehicle on the back of a high-altitude aircraft and get up to the high altitudes and cut the space vehicle off, and just use it just for penetrating the atmosphere and escaping Earth's gravity.
That's what I was thinking.
Sounds like we have two partners here a few years ahead. What about you, Shelby?
I guess I'll talk about how I'd like to contribute to NASA. Obviously, you all know my grandpa, Papa as I call him. And I guess since I've been going to his house since I was little, he kind of got me interested in the space program, and it's just fascinating. So I guess all through school, I've been interested in researching different aspects of NASA, and I would really like to be involved in education with space exploration because I feel like it's a little bit left behind. I remember asking my teachers, are we going to learn about space? And they're like, not really. The landing on the moon, but not anything other than that really. So whether it's in high school education at NASA, which I would love to do work in the high school aerospace scholar program that I participated in last year, and getting students involved and interested in space exploration so they can lead the future of space exploration as well. But I also think many other aspects of NASA are interesting, such as mission control and anything administrative or anything that's organized. But really with the education department and working with the future of our generation.
Thank you. Owen, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Well, I think the reason that we should keep exploring space is just because we need to push the boundaries and explore like we used to. But we need to learn all we can about space so we can benefit mankind and get mankind better.
Just to add on to what I was saying earlier, and what Nick helped me out with was with the airplane. Like, the only reason we have the huge solid and liquid boosters for the rocket is to escape the main atmosphere. And if you, well, since the new shuttle design is coming out within the next 2 or 3 years anyway, like an airplane could just carry up the module itself or the craft itself. It would fly up to like the stratosphere, and then it would just launch it from there, and that would take a lot less fuel. And yeah, you wouldn't have the big rockets to worry about filling up every time either.
Thank you, Zach. And Jarrett, is there anything else that you would like to add?
No.
No? Okay. Nick?
Well, for me, what I'd like to contribute, I'd just really like to contribute in any way that I could. But what I would really like to do is engineering somehow, maybe, just maybe with the Mars program, maybe with, maybe with a new generation of rockets. Just any way that I could help. That's where I'd like to.
Okay, thank you. And I offered to these panelists to think of a question that they might want to know from all of you, since we've just shared their ideas with you. And so I'd like to just open it up to the 5 of you. If one of you would like to go first and ask the audience a question.
Okay, I'll go first. I do have a question. In yesterday's conversation throughout the whole day, somebody mentioned that if the holidays were to happen now, it wouldn't necessarily get done, or that there was a lot more leeway back then with decision making. And I guess wanting clarification on whether that's a NASA administrative issue or if it's the government's issue with different aspects of that, if that question makes sense.
Any takers? John, if you could just wait 1 second, we're coming to you with a mic.
I think I was the one that brought that up. I was passing along an observation by Dr. Kraft. Yes, it's a somewhat extreme statement, but I think he was relating to the rather overdone committee review, documentation required to move things forward. The nation has become very risk adverse, and much of what complicates matters now is a part of that risk averse nature. We have so much oversight and everything, it's difficult to move forward, but I believe the people of NASA and the people in this room will find ways to work with that and move things forward. It just may take a little longer now than to accomplish something as it did in the past.
Thank you, John. So do you have any further follow-on questions to that, Shelby?
I haven't answered it. Thank you.
Okay.
I had a question about the International Space Station. I was wondering how long can one supply of oxygen last on it? Because, I don't know, I just wanted to know.
Well, let's see. My reference is a little old since I've been retired for 8 years, but in the International Space Station, consumables are maintained at a level to keep you going for quite some time if the logistics stop. In other words, you can miss a logistics flight and still sustain. So today, if the shuttle doesn't fly and the Progress doesn't fly and so on, the crew can still operate and do their thing for 280 days, 300 days. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's quite some time, and it varies as a function of the amount of logistics that you have on board. So it's not like the station crew and their ability to operate is tied to the next launch that's bringing logistics up. You maintain a reserve in the future so you'll be able to operate for some time before you really get into a situation where you'd have to decrew the space. So it's really a number of months up to a year before you'd really get in trouble with things like oxygen, food, and the other consumables you need to keep the station operating.
Thank you, Tommy. It looks like we have one more comment.
Just to add for the station oxygen system, we have a new system that we launched about a year and a half ago, the oxygen generation system, and we make the oxygen out of the water that comes out of a regenerative ecosystem. So while we use the consumables to support sometimes when the shuttle crew's up there, we have 13 crew on board, we can't sustain all the oxygen, but with just the station crew on board, our system sustains all the 6 crew. As long as we're making water, we can make.
Thank you. Jared, did you have a question?
Yes.
Go for it.
How much gas would it take the fastest planes to get, fastest space shuttles to get to the space station?
Any takers? How much gas does it take to get the fastest plane to the space station?
How much fuel? Boy, I may have known that once, but I don't. A bunch. One of the challenges of the future, of course, is the cost of launching people in low Earth orbit. And some people struggle with why we haven't made much progress. But the business of flying through the atmosphere, which is sensible up to at least 100,000 feet, is a big job. The dynamic pressures are very high, and the forces are very high, and the energy you have to spend to go from 0 miles per hour to 17,600 miles per hour is a lot of energy. So it takes a lot of energy to get in orbit, and there's a lot of forces operating on you before you get there. So there's a lot of work to be done to turn launching something from the ground into low Earth orbit as routinely as many of you will fly on an airplane this evening when you go home.
Thank you, Tommy. Nick or Owen, did you have a question for the audience?
Well, I was wondering if we did get like people to the Mars, if we got people to Mars on a mission, how many people would be on that crew? Because in Apollo we had 3 people, I think. So how many would we have for the Mars exploration?
Well, Howdy, I don't think anybody knows, but just think, when you go to Mars, you need more than we have today. You need people who specialize in being mechanics. You need a cook. You need all of these things that you need to operate in your day-to-day living, and you can't resupply them every 3 months like you do today. You're 6 months away, and the guys on the ground can't help you because today we say, "Hello, crew," and the crew said, "Yes, I'm here." But when you go to Mars, you say, "Hello, crew," and an hour later you get, "I hear you." So you have to communicate differently, and your operations strategy has to be different. So, going to Mars, you need to think a lot about the crew and the operations concept of how you're going to operate and what kind of skills you need. You need people who are very innovative. Conrad, for example, astronaut Conrad, was a fantastic guy in terms of he could do things by just his skill level. I carried the crew procedures down to him before we launched off on the second Skylab flight, and that had been developed, John, in 16 days. And here this guy was going up to rescue the space, the Skylab, and he hadn't seen any of this stuff. And I walked into the crew quarters and said, "Do you need a briefing?" He said, "No, you guys wrote them and I'll do them." So anyway, you need all kinds of skills, and so determining the crew mix is going to be a very interesting thing. You need all of the things it takes to operate here on the Earth. So we'll see what the crew really looks like someday.
Thanks again, Thomas. And Nick, did you have a question?
Yep. What type of engineering should I look into for my future at NASA?
Sounds like arrow and a chuckle is meaning a whole bunch of different types, depending on the specific interest that you might have.
I was wondering, besides, or actually, because wasn't the L Cross launch successful and didn't they find water first? I was wondering, and wasn't that on Mars, right? Was that on Mars or the moon?
That was on the moon.
Then, and someone said something about a new system that could transfer water into oxygen. Can you use that to take the water on the moon and make it into oxygen to oxidize the planet?
Yeah, I'll answer your first part. Yeah, that was regarding L-Cross. We did launch it in June of last year, made it to the moon in October, and they did crash the Centaur into the crater, and the debris that was generated, they were able to demonstrate water ice. Now, how much of that water ice would be enough to actually sustain a system that was described here, I'm not sure about, but it was the moon, and that is an interesting idea. One of the other things that they talked about too is that you mentioned oxygen would be one of the resources, but hydrogen would also be another resource that they would be able to extract from the water for any type of expedition on the moon. So that's your first part. I'll have to turn it over to somebody else to answer your second part.
I can't answer your question, but since I brought up the OGS, all I'll say is maybe you can figure that out for us.
And I'd like to open it up to the audience now if you have any questions for the panelists.
Question for Shelby. How do you suggest that we get the word out on spin-offs? And you heard the previous speaker talking about a MRSA vaccine. That's going to be a big deal. But you're of a new generation of communication tools. What would you suggest?
Well, that's interesting you asked that, because I almost asked you guys the same question. But I guess in my generation, we use Facebook. I'm on Facebook all the time. So that's one way. And even maybe, I don't know if it's just better advertising in the just different ways of, or I guess the different spin-offs saying this is a NASA product or something like that. But I haven't necessarily thought of that. I just know it needs to happen and it needs to get done, because I've had friends at school. I presented a research paper presentation last year on this topic, and they're like, "Why is it important? Why is it important?" And I had all of these answers, and they're like, "Oh, okay, I didn't even know NASA did that." So, I mean, it's just something that needs to be done. There needs to be a way that it needs to get the word out, and I don't necessarily know. Haven't really thought about that, but like I said, I know it needs to be done, and we need to come up with an idea to do that.
My question was actually also for Shelby, and you've already started answering it. In fact, I was going to ask you, and I'll go right ahead and do that. You had talked about being interested in educating future engineers, mathematicians, and scientists, but you just started to tell me other people who you think you or others of your generation or mine should be educating. And I was wondering if you had thought at all about who else we need to be educating to ensure the success of NASA. A bunch of us geeks in the room got here because of science and engineering and mathematics education, but we've heard a lot about other people we need as allies and helpers, and I was wondering if you thought about what other education we should be focusing on in addition to the science and math and engineering.
Okay. I think, okay, can I ask you a question before I answer? So, so I make sure I answer it. Other aspects of education or people to tell?
Probably both, right?
Okay.
Do we need to educate people who are going to go on to be politicians or people who are going to go on to be consumers and taxpayers? And what should we be educating which people about?
Okay. I'll answer the people question first. I think it's important that all people know the aspects and benefits of NASA. I have friends that are against the space program because she's all into the environment and she says it's too much money and it doesn't help, and I try to convince her otherwise. But I think it's also important that we influence people that are going to be in politics and be in the government, because of NASA's a government organization, I guess you could say, and our money, the money that NASA gets is from the government. And so if you have people in Congress who are for NASA and for promoting space exploration, you will probably have a better opportunity to get more money and more support from our Congress, and even just other general people in the world are in our country who don't necessarily work with science or math or in our government, just for them to know so they can tell others and they can appreciate what NASA does when when there's a launch, when something goes on, because in the past it seems that people just get interested in NASA when something bad happens, and that's not necessarily how it should be, because there's a lot of good that NASA does that's not necessarily recognized by the public. So, does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, great.
Thank you. Any other questions?
It's felt that 65 million years ago, an asteroid wiped out the dinosaurs, right? One mission that NASA's proposing is to go to asteroids. How would the panel balance, protecting the Earth from the threat of asteroids with the very cool exploration, other cool exploration efforts to go to the Moon and Mars?
Well, I think that if the time like that ever comes, then there should be some procedure to try and save ourselves from that. And just emergency plans. We could try it just to see if it works. But after that, we just know how it is. We just educate the future ones on how we do it. But after setting the procedure, I believe that we should just go out into space and not focus on that too much, unless new engine technology or such that comes up.
Zach, you looked like you had something else to add.
I was gonna say, because it's meteors, you could have special satellites or probes just wandering the planet, or maybe the moon and places around us, and they could just be sitting there with a bunch of stuff that they could use to stop it. I don't know, since most meteors are made of iron, they have high concentrations of iron. If you had a group of satellites that could be propelled towards the meteor when it came, if they had a strong enough magnet, they could probably just repel it away if they stopped it soon enough before it got into the gravity and was, yeah.
Any others?
I think I could say for all of us that we really appreciate your interest and curiosity, creativity, and intelligence regarding space, so thank you for that. I was interested in, there was a lot of discussion on competing in a race to go to space and to go further. I was interested if we've kind of moved a little bit from competing back in the Apollo days to collaborating. And I was interested in the panel's thoughts on whether you think it's more important for the U.S. to lead or mainly to collaborate, or both.
Well, kind of like
the international community.
Kind of like what I said, I believe international cooperation is important. Maybe just make it, government space administrations versus private exploration companies. Because the privatization of many things has greatly improved things as well. So it might become one of those government versus the people things.
I would say on that topic of international cooperation, I think it's absolutely necessary that we collaborate with our international partners because of the space station and there's always other astronauts or whatever they call them in their other countries flying on the shuttle to the station to do experiments. And yes, I think we separate ourselves, each country, and we kind of do their own thing. But I think to get a better grasp on the future, I think it's best to work together, especially with just the things going on in the world and taking that out of space. I think we need international cooperation to better get things done.
I somewhat agree because it's good to mix ideas together. So, for example, U.S. with Russia. Okay, so this is your engine, this is my engine. Let's make it together and what's better. But then again, when you're building it, you're not building it in the same place, and there'd be a little competition.
And well, a good example of this would be General Motors in the auto industry, because there used to be a competition between the companies that General Motors owned. Like the Chevrolet wanted to be better than the Pontiac, and then there's then Ford and its assets. They were trying to compete against each other as well, like that, while both companies were competing against each other. So anything like that might be applicable to this situation.
Thank you. I think we have a question in the back, and then.
Sure. First off, thank you guys. I know you've been up there for a while, so I'll try to make this quick. It's really great. As Catherine said in her intro, this is really about learning from each generation and passing knowledge between generations. That's what this forum's about. So it's really great to have your guys' participation in this forum. I think my question is, each generation has a different impression of NASA. They have a different moment, they have a different view of NASA and something that really is this indelible experience that they have from NASA. So I'd like to get you guys' impression about what's your favorite NASA mission, or what's your first moment where you said, wow, space is really cool, that's really something that I'm interested in. So for example, for me, it was really when I was in high school and the Mars Pathfinder mission, and I saw this little rover drive off the top of the lander and go explore rock. It was just, wow, that's really cool, space is really cool. And that's what ended up making me go and work at JPL, ended up working on the Mars program. So kind of what inspires you about space? What's the most interesting thing you know from space?
Jarrett, can we start with you? What do you think's so inspiring about NASA?
Not me.
That they can make them up.
Do you remember a day, maybe when you were younger and you thought, wow, NASA is so cool, I love NASA? Was there a certain astronaut or something you saw on TV that really stuck with you?
No.
No? Do you find NASA interesting?
Yes.
Yes? How come?
Why do you think NASA's cool?
Because they know how to design the engines to push all that power just to get in the space.
Thank you. Zach?
Wait, what? Oh yeah, there are a few moments. The first one for me was when I was 4 or 5, I don't know, it was a while ago. The Mir launch, or the Mir landing, I was watching that in Ames on a big screen, and this news reporter came to interview my grandfather about it. And I was just sitting on this stool, or this edge, because it was in this theater. I was sitting on a rail watching the thing landing, and it was really exciting. But then something funny happened. The reporter turned away from my grandfather and he started asking me questions, and I spent like an hour talking to the reporter, and it was just, that was one moment. It was really fun, and surprisingly, I knew a lot about it. And the second thing was when I first heard about the Pioneer or Voyager, one of the, I forget the name between them, but it was like passing maybe Jupiter or something. I heard about that, I don't remember, when I was like, again, 6 or 7, that was just inspiring. And also my grandpa, when I was, wow, again, that age. 6 and 7 is a big time for me in NASA. I always came over to my grandparents' house after school, and I used to hang out with our dog, or my grandparents' dog, Casey, big, awesome golden retriever. I always asked my grandpa if I could do a paper airplane contest with him. At first, he beat me every time. Like, he made one that could fly like 30 feet into the grass, and mine just... But after like 3 months or so, I made some that could just glide perfectly, even farther than his. And I don't know what happened, but his just started repeating what I did. Yeah. That was a really fun time. It just got me thinking about, and so he also brought me to NASA a bunch of times to see the new models and what the scientists were doing. And I got to walk in the big wind tunnel, and that was just really cool. I got to see all the things that NASA did, and I got to see my grandpa building airplanes, and I saw I thought that's what NASA pays off. You get really good at a bunch of stuff like that, and yeah.
Thank you, Zach. Owen, did you want to share what inspired you about NASA?
Well, it just seems so crazy just how vast space is. Now, none of the astronauts are scared to go up there and explore it. Like, no matter where they are, they're excited to go out there and keep exploring. Even if there's high possibilities that they may die or get lost, they still want to go up there and explore and learn.
Shelby or Nick?
Well, I guess I have two. My first one would be when your grandpa is Tommy Holloway, and he has all this space stuff in the house, and you get to look at all of it. And as a little girl, just going to visit him at work and him touring JSC with us. And then 10 years ago, my first space shuttle launch. That was incredible. So that would be two.
I never really had like one of those, oh wow, NASA's, this is awesome, I want to be a part of it moments. It just kind of sort of fell into interest. But I guess maybe if there was a moment that I could say that I really got interested into it was, I saw a video of the Mars rover, and I'd always been a big car freak, so I started researching about the Apollo mission, and then as NASA as an overall thing, and it's kind of been like that.
Thank you. And I think, Kristen, do you have a question in the front? Yeah, we'll just do it on the microphone.
Shelby mentioned already that her teachers didn't really teach any space or NASA in school. Do any of your teachers mention space or NASA in any of your classes?
For me in elementary school, they kind of taught about the solar system, like Mars is here, Pluto's here, Jupiter's here, this is the storm. Like, that's all they did. But I tried to get a little more, so for like 1st grade through 4th or something, I got my grandpa to come and teach a lesson for a long time. And every year, my classmates were like, when's he coming? When's he coming? When's he coming? And then for the past 2 years, I got him to work in this science symposium at my middle school. And again, when's he coming? When's he coming? When's he coming? They all really liked him. And yeah.
Do any other of you have anything to share about what your school teaches you about space?
Well, my school really teaches me, or teaches us, just astronomy as a whole. We spend less time on the solar system, more time, on the stars, what they're made of, their temperatures based on color. But they never really got into the whole NASA thing. They just, like when they were talking about Mars, they just mentioned the Mars rovers, but never any real focus on NASA.
I know at my school, if we want to talk about NASA or someone has an interest, it's usually brought into the classroom by a student, which is fine because they have the passion for it, which is great. But I do wish it was taught more, but I really think it's interesting, and maybe not all my classmates do, but I do think it should be taught more, and not just the first landing on the moon and the Challenger, but more than that.
Jared, does your school teach you about space? No? Okay.
Yes.
A little bit? It's the NASA Explorer School, right? Yeah.
Bad if they didn't.
Owen, what about you? Is there space in your curriculum?
Well, in my science class, we're learning about space right now, but what we usually do for all of our subjects, we just get a little packet about it and we fill in the notes. We spend about 1 or 2 weeks on it, then we have a test and move on to something else. And that's what we're doing right now. We haven't even mentioned NASA, but in my Texas history class, we're actually learning more about NASA than a whole bunch of all my other years in all my other schools. And so we're watching Apollo 13, and but we're only really focusing on the first landing on the moon and nothing they did after that, because now we're going to move back to the World War I and World War II. So I wish they would teach more about NASA at my school, but I won't change for a while.
In a way, it could be good, but probably bad, but because it kind of separates the people who really have a passion for it and people who are really committed to it to people who just think, I might be interested in this, I don't know, I just like to try it out. There's nothing like that. There's just people who say, I want to do this, and really committed to trying this out.
Well, it looks like all of you are going to be the next leaders of the decades to come, so you can definitely bring your influence and motivation into the schools and make space more part of the curriculum. I think that will... Oh, one last
Catherine,
question.
I had one thing. It's not a question for the kids. So I'm Nick's dad, Johnny. I've worked for Best Buy for over 23 years. And I've had the fortune of knowing Ed and hanging out at the Masters Forum several years ago. And what's fascinating, I ran into Tom's, we were coming out of the restroom yesterday, and made a comment, says, what's interesting is the similarities between what we do for a living within Best Buy, and that happens to be the largest electronics retailer in the world, and what you do. And it comes down to some common things. One is money always plays into it, but it always comes down to leadership and people. And it's kept taking notes after notes after notes. Every time I come, I validate and I learn. But what's interesting is one of the things that has been coming up here, one of the comments that Shelby had was around how do you touch the kids of today? And I will tell you, we are spending a disproportionate amount of money, time, and resources doing that exact thing, because Best Buy has transitioned from a company that sold VCRs and commodity goods to helping people connect. The future of an organization like ours is not about selling TVs, it's about how do we connect people to whether it be the different technologies that exist today. And I'll share a quick story with you, and maybe a little more insight. I was at a meeting in Reno, Nevada, I think it was a week or two ago. One of the gentlemen I was with was sitting next to me, and we were having a sidebar conversation during the session, and he said he just talked to his son that morning. And he proceeded to tell me that he called his boy on Skype with his laptop from his room, and his son answered. Well, he's got one of the new 3D TVs, which actually allows him to go up, hit the button, and Dad's up on the television screen. And so he goes and has the conversation with his dad, and he says, Dad, what are you doing in Nevada? And he says, I'm talking about connected digital solutions. And he says, isn't that what you have? Isn't that one of the applications you have on your iPhone? And he says, no, son. He said, that's actually called Connect 4. His son says, that's right, that's the application that I use to use the remote control for the TV and the stereo. And he says, that's exactly right. And so the conversation continues for a little while. And his son says, Dad, I don't have much time. I got to get ready for school, and I'm going to miss the end of X-Men Revolution. Can I go now? He's 6 years old. Right? So I think you put it in perspective. I think the future is unbelievable, and I think myself growing up and a lot of folks, they've always looked at NASA almost as a group of elitists. When you talk about who are the smartest people in the world, you consistently hear the people who work at NASA. And I think in so many ways, people don't get inspired or interested because they don't think that they're capable of even having the conversation. Now, if you go out and you tell someone that, you know what, we're getting close to a solution for staph infection, I don't know what the number was, but I think your interest group all of a sudden increases by, what, 1,000,000-fold or whatever it is. So I would just share this, that I think the future is bright. We haven't figured it out. I would tell you that social networking certainly is not going to go away. I learned more up in the bedroom 30 minutes before this started just from Nick goofing around on the internet than I've learned probably in the last year through books or any other things. So good luck, kids.
Thank you. And with that, if we can just... Sorry?
Martin had a question, I think. Do you have a question, Martin?
One last... Okay.
Just a short question of curiosity to all the panel members. Where, if at all, would you like to fly on a space mission? What would be your preferred or the most exciting target, where you want to go in the future? Sometimes, it can be very far in the future.
Did you understand the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I never really thought about going into space much, just helping them get into space. But if it were to, if something like that were to happen, I'd say, just the moon. The moon seems like a good, just seems like a nice place to go. I don't know.
Any others of you, if you went to space, where would you want to go?
Well,
I would want to go to the moon also, but I know that the dark side of the moon is like really cold and you couldn't really live over there. But I want to go over to that side. That's because on Earth we never see that side of the moon, just because we always see the same side of the moon because of its revolution, rotation around the Earth and Sun. So it'd be really cool to see the other side of the moon, side of the moon that we always see.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't really want to go into outer space for a few reasons. One, I would actually rather just create the machines that would help people get into space. And, the rocket itself, to me, it kind of seems questionable. Sorry if I'm seeming kind of paranoid, but if it's like 1 or 2 degrees off, then instead of going to Mars, you'll end up in Pluto. And then your wife's going to be like, I told you to ask for directions. But, yeah, and if it's like, if the fuel is just 1 drop off from what it should be, then it'll explode like mid-launch. But what I was talking about, like the flight at like a steady 40-degree angle or something, then you wouldn't need the huge explosive rocket. You would just need a teeny little rocket that would get you maybe like 5 miles up past the atmosphere. Or not really 5, more like 5,000, 500, something like that. But if I did get into outer space, I'd go into another solar system. I mean, places have to be explored. We already know a lot of stuff about our solar system, like Mars, big red ball, very dusty, can't live there. Pluto, cold. But other solar systems, we don't know very much about it, and it'd be cool to go there.
Jared or Shelby, do either of you want to answer this question where you might like to go in space, if you have the chance?
If I had a chance, I would go to the moon. I I'd go to the dark side too.
Jarrett wants to join Owen on the dark side of the moon. How about you, Shelby?
I would, well, I'd like to go to the International Space Station because it's interesting. And then I would like to go to the moon, but first I would like to go to the space station.
Well, thank you. If you all could help me applaud these